Hi, Pete. Welcome back. How are you?
Doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So, I want to jump right into a follow up from our last video that we did on budgeting. And I really want to talk in a little bit more depth about the idea of overspending and how to help people that feel like they're stuck in a rut, so to speak, of overspending more than what they're bringing into their home. Um, so, if you're working with a client who feels like they're really in a cycle that they can't get out of, how do you begin working with that?
Well, there's two parts to that. The first one is the financial part, and that's part of doing the budget, figuring out what you're actually spending, and then actually breaking it down to two pieces. What is a need and what is a want?
Okay.
And for some, that is the hard thing to grapple with because we always think of a need as a home, as food, as providing for our children. But there are very few needs. For example, a home that where you it's a four-bedroom home you're sharing with three families, that is a need. A want is having a place of your own. For food, rice and beans are a need, and everything else is a want. There's nothing wrong with having wants as long as you're getting the exact wants that you really desire in your life. For example, the second part to figure out overspending is the emotional side. What is it that you really want out of life? And for people, it gets down to peace, love, and joy. And the part of a budget and figuring out which wants you can have in your life is figuring out what brings you the most peace, love, and joy.
Okay.
And what people kind of have a problem with overspending is they have no idea, and they're just trying to grab everything to get as much happiness in their lives as possible because they don't really know what makes them happy.
Oh, that's big. That's huge. That's a big shift. Okay, so I just want to stay with that a minute because I know for me, just like starting to think about it in those terms is a whole big turnaround in my head. So I don't want to hurry through this too quickly. I want people to like be
Okay.
able to like see it here, really get into it. Okay, so if you're chronically overspending or you feel like you're stuck in a cycle where you're overspending all the time, it's really representative of believing that the spending is going to make you happy.
Exactly. We try to bring as much happiness in our lives, and we glorify these days people who have money. Even last night with the Oscars,
Yeah, yeah.
look at how fabulous they look and all their gift bags they get from the Oscars. They must really have it well.
Yeah, yeah.
But the key to remember is how many divorces, how many things of actors coming out and saying they have been depressed in their lives does it take for us to realize that more is never enough. If
And
you're unhappy now with what you have, you're still going to be unhappy when you have more money or spend more.
yeah, and I can attest to that because I've worked with clients long enough to know that I have plenty of clients that come in my door that make good money, that they feel like, their financial life, so to speak, is in order, but they're like, hey, I've got everything I want. How come I'm not happy?
Well, really, they don't have everything they want or they would be happy. They
Right.
have everything they think they want.
That is such a great point, and that's so what we think we want is really, I think, what the culture is telling us we should want or will make us happy.
Exactly. Instead of our own personal preferences of what really makes us happy. For some, it may be outside on a beach. For some, it may be meditating in the woods. For others, it may be on an amusement park ride.
Mm.
Different things make different people happy. And I think that's what we need to get to is what really brings us the most peace, love, and joy and happiness in our lives. And you can find out you can have that for very little.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, so when you're working with somebody who is in a cycle of overspending and you start talking about this topic, um, how do you get them like through the actual exercise of beginning to identify what really makes them happy or what they really want versus being stuck in where they're at?
Well, I have them list out a couple of things that they want physically and see which one resonates the most. For example, it may be a trip to Hawaii. And then I say, what is it about the trip to Hawaii that you need or want in your life right now? And they kind of start going down deeper and deeper. Maybe it is they've had a rough time at work and they need a break. maybe they've had an argument with their spouse and they need to do a makeup and treat their spouse and get their relationship back on track. Once we start uncovering what is behind the physical want, we start seeing the emotional needs that we have. And once you identify the emotional needs, you can find that you can have that in many different ways other than a trip to Hawaii that may break your bank.
Okay, great, great. Okay. And that's a great example. That's real concrete. Let's think about one, maybe somebody who just goes out and spends a lot, spends too much chronically on, like, let's say clothes, and I'm going to use a woman as an example just because I'm a woman. Spends too much on clothes and then maybe jewelry and perfume and makeup, and they know they don't have the money, but they're out there spending it, and they can't seem to stop themselves.
Well, the key is to identify the emotional need while you're out there shopping.
Okay.
Financial experts for years have said you shouldn't go shopping when you feel shameful, angry, guilty because you're going to spend more while you're actually shopping. But they never have said what to do with that.
Yeah.
The key is to identify with the guilt or shame you feel while shopping and to explore those in more depth to figure out what is really triggering those feelings of shame and guilt. And it's not about the money. Once you figure out what's going on inside you, the spending will stop.
Yeah. So it's kind of, I mean, we got to this place before in our last video when we were talking about the budgeting. It's really about when you are overspending, when you're actually in the loop of doing it, to be able to identify kind of what the feeling is you're getting from the spending, because that's the trail to find out what's missing.
Yeah, it's figuring out what feeling you want from the spending. It lets you identify what feeling you had that you were trying to numb out, to overcome.
Okay.
And then you can figure out what really triggered that feeling.
Okay, so I think this part is can be a little bit complicated for people, and I'm sure you found this when you're working with clients. I know when I'm working with people, it's like, because when we're in a loop of behavior like overspending and we do it so quickly, it's hard to figure out what that feeling is because we're so quickly moving away from it.
Exactly. And that's kind of what helps me with budgeting. When I help somebody with a budget and actually write down the numbers, it brings back that feeling they had while they were shopping back into the meeting between my client and myself so that we can recreate it and figure out what's really going on underneath. Because as you said, a lot of people have habits and they keep on doing the habits over and over again. Well, if we were all smart enough to figure out our own habits, there would be no overspending, but it's difficult. That's where you need a friend, you need somebody to talk to and figure out what's going on, somebody to bounce an idea off of.
Right, right. Okay, so great. So in order to get to uncover the feelings in more depth, it's hard, isn't it? I mean, what we're asking people to do is not necessarily the easy route, right?
No, but really, a friend always taught me that when we try to take the easy path, our lives become harder because the overspending is not going to stop, even with a financial budget. Just like a diet, we know what we should and shouldn't eat, but these shoulds never really help us with overcoming what is our drivers, our emotions.
Yeah.
So for me, it's better to take the harder route.
Yeah.
Deal with these emotions up front because then our lives will get easier.
Yeah. I always think of it too as like a postponement. So if you stick, as long as you're sticking with the behavior, you're just postponing and compounding, really getting to what you eventually have to get to. And what you have to get to is what's going on inside that's causing you to behave in a way that ultimately is making a mess.
Absolutely. If you look at it in our economy, look at where we put ourselves now. We can blame the bankers and everyone else for what happened, but how long have we talked about overspending in America?
Yeah, yeah.
And it finally got to a tipping point. Yes, the bankers were at fault for misleading people. However, we kind of drove ourselves to the cliff, and they just helped us over it.
Right, right. So come back here. What you're saying, your message and my message. Come back here. Look inside yourself. Start to discover what's going on. Now, I want to just go back. Let's wrap up with the idea of distinguishing between needs and wants, because you talked about that at the beginning, and I think that that's a really powerful place for people to explore in them. It's like taking your power back almost when you start to really, you know, clarify those.
Exactly. A need is just something basic to sustain life. Food, shelter, clothing.
Right.
A want is everything else. And what usually happens, though, is that people turn a want into a need. You know, for example, a house. I need to make the mortgage payment. I need to keep my house or I'll be left homeless. Well, no. A need is even renting a one-bedroom apartment for your family of 4 or 5. Remember, that a couple hundred years ago, that's basically all they had was a 500 square foot home.
Yeah.
Now we have a 2,000 square foot home, and we think of that as a need when it really is a want.
Yeah, yeah. So we're really reconditioning ourselves about how we think about the messages we give ourselves about what we need and what we want.
Yes. We recondition ourselves because we feel the need to be as good as everyone else. So if somebody, your neighbor, has a new car, you may think, well, I need a new car because my car is about ready to break down. When in actuality, you may have another 5 to 10 years of it to go. So having a new car is really a want, but we think of it as a need unconsciously because we see somebody else around us have it.
Yeah.
And so it builds up that need of wanting to be more than, greater than, to prove our worth. So we prove it in the physical possessions, but we never really, even with a new car, never really feel it within ourselves.
Right. And if we really felt it within ourselves, that need would go away for the new car, for the bigger house, for the whatever, right?
Absolutely.
And
then you would be more at choice by choosing which want you really have. Having a nice house is great if that is what you really want. If you feel that to provide for my family and bring us closer, we want a nice house, but we understand by having a little bit bigger house, we may have to give up that family vacation in Disney World. But that's the choice of want. What brings your family closer together? And for some, it's playing games around the card table at night. For others, it's taking that vacation in Disney World. It's fine, but understand what brings you most peace, love, and joy, and go after those things.
Right. Okay, so I just got this really great image when you were talking, and it was the image that people that are sitting, let's say, in their home thinking, as soon as I move, you know, it's going to be so much easier and so much better because our family will get along, we'll have more space, I'll feel better about, you know, how I can organize my home. And really that's that's not a truth. That's the story we're telling ourselves, when in fact we could be happy. We're going to just transfer exactly what's going on in that place to the next place.
Absolutely. And that's kind of where we have as a society. Like I said before we had a 500 or 1,000 square foot home. Now the average home size is 2,000, and we think we're going to be happier, and we're not.
Right.
Because we haven't gone back to what really makes our family happy.
Yeah.
And like I said, if it's sitting around the card table playing cards, you could do that in a 500 square foot home or 2,000 to figure that you need more room to entertain. It's just kind of pushing off your decision to be happy, as you would say earlier.
Yeah, right. So this is great. I mean, it's great for people to start to reframe. I mean, I think the two big messages today are really starting to take time to like sort through what is a need versus a want. And if you have a want, to really do some soul searching about what that really is and identifying that, right?
Well, two things. One, prioritizing your want. What is really a want for me, and what's going to bring me and my family the most peace, love, and joy? And then two, brainstorming ideas on how to get that want. Because it's not always the trip to Hawaii. It's never always the bigger house. Once you brainstorm ways to do that, you may find that you can have that right here and now for relatively few dollars.
Great. That's so empowering. Such a different way of looking at it. Okay, I think we're done. So, you know, I want to kind of stop right there because I don't want to go over, but I hope we can come back and do it again.
Absolutely.
Great. Thanks, Pete.
You're welcome.